They didn't just fine me for a crooked mailbox or threaten me over lawn height this time. The HOA president crossed a line no parent can forgive. My teenage son was dragged off the sidewalk by her so-called community enforcers, zip-tied, and shoved into a black SUV. She called it a safety detention. I call it what it really was, kidnapping. What she didn't realize, though, is that my wife isn't just any neighbor, she's the district attorney. And Karen had no idea whose family she just declared war on. My name is Adrian Cole, and until that evening, I thought my life was built on logic, balance, and predictability. As a systems engineer, my entire career is about order writing code where every cause has an effect, every bug has a fix, and every problem has a solution. I thrived on control, not chaos. Our quiet home in the Willow Creek Estates neighborhood reflected that same order: white-trimmed windows, a freshly cut lawn, and dinners where laughter usually drowned out the hum of the dishwasher. My wife, Lillian, balanced me perfectly. Where I relied on reason, she wielded the law. She wasn't just strong, she was the district attorney of our county, a woman who spent her life untangling the messiest, darkest corners of society. Together, we believed we had built something safe, something unshakable, for our son, Tyler. That illusion shattered in a single notification. It was just past 6 p.m. I was crouched in the garage, knuckles streaked with grease, wrestling with an old lawnmower that hadn't started in 2 summers. My phone buzzed. A family tracking alert. I glanced casually, expecting the usual ping, confirming that Tyler had left robotics club. But instead, the words froze me cold. Tyler's location disabled. My stomach twisted like a coil tightening. Tyler never turned off tracking. It was our deal, his way of reassuring us, and our way of keeping peace in a world where bad things happen too often. I tried calling him, straight to voicemail. That was when another message appeared, this time from Lillian. It wasn't a paragraph, not even a full sentence, just 2 words that split me in half. Call me. I dialed instantly. My thumb slipped the first time from shaking so badly, but she answered before the first ring finished. Her voice, normally sharp, confident, even intimidating in a courtroom, cracked around the edges. Adrian, neighbor Sam just called. His security camera, it caught them. A black SUV, no plates. 2 men. They grabbed Tyler off the sidewalk. I dropped the wrench. It clattered on the concrete, the sharp metallic echo like the sound of my own nerves breaking. Grabbed him. The words came out of me in a hoarse whisper. Who Karen's men? Lillian said, her voice bitter with certainty. Those idiots she calls her community enforcement team. They were wearing those fake tactical vests again. They shoved our son into that SUV like he was a criminal. Karen Holt, HOA president, our tyrant in a blazer, a woman who treated bylaws like sacred scripture and the neighborhood like her private kingdom. She wasn't law enforcement, no matter how badly she wanted to be. Years ago, she had washed out of the police academy's psychological evaluation. The rumors were ugly, unstable, controlling, narcissistic. Denied a badge, she found her stage in Willow Creek Estates, where every mailbox height and lawn measurement gave her power she had never earned. I remembered her words from just last week when she cornered me at the community mailbox. Her son, Daniel, a nervous kid with hunched shoulders and a stammer, had told her Tyler was bullying him. Karen's voice had dripped with venom as she accused my boy of psychological terrorism. I had brushed it off then. Tyler isn't a bully, he's the kind of kid who rescues baby turtles from storm drains. But Karen leaned in close, her eyes narrowing. There are predators in this community, Mr. Cole, and I have 0 tolerance. I thought it was melodrama. Now I knew it had been a threat. The thought that Tyler, my Tyler, was in the hands of those goons made something primitive erupt inside me. My reason, my logic, every ounce of engineer's calm was obliterated. In its place came something raw, something animal. I stormed out of the garage, into the golden glow of our suburban street, staring at the sidewalks that had just become a crime scene. The neighborhood was too quiet. The stillness mocked me. Just an hour ago, Tyler had walked down that very sidewalk with his headphones in, probably daydreaming about gears and code. Now he was gone. A silver sedan screeched into the driveway, Lillian's car. She jumped out, phone glued to her ear, her face a mask of fury and control, but her hands trembled. She was a mother first. "They've got dispatch working," she said, snapping her fingers at me. "But Adrian, these guys are ghosts. No registered vehicle, no official authority. They're not real cops. They don't need to be real cops." I growled. "They've got my son." Her eyes locked onto mine, sharp as glass. "We're getting him back. But we don't run blind. We run smart. Show me his tracker." I fumbled with my phone, pulling up the app. The dot was gone, disabled. My pulse hammered in my throat. But then Lillian reminded me the watch. I had bought Tyler a GPS smartwatch months ago, paranoid about the very nightmare that was happening now. My fingers flew. Another app opened, and there it was, a tiny blue dot pulsing near the old clubhouse by the lake. Of course, the clubhouse. That decaying husk of a building the HOA board never repaired, always postponing its demolition with excuses about budgetary issues. It wasn't just storage. Karen had repurposed it illegally, without permits, cameras, steel bars, locks. My throat went dry. "He's there." Lillian's jaw tightened. She was already dialing. Not 911 this time. No, she was calling higher. A judge she knew personally. Someone who could authorize a telephonic warrant before local police even finished their coffee. I stood frozen in the driveway, heart pounding, rage coursing like electricity. Logic was gone. The storm had made landfall. My son was in the hands of a power-mad woman who believed HOA bylaws gave her the right to abduct children. And in that moment, one truth burned hotter than any fear. She had no idea who she had just picked a fight with. The drive to the old clubhouse was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Every stop sign felt like an insult. Every red light like a deliberate barrier between me and my son. Lillian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her voice steady but clipped as she relayed the details to Judge Morales over the phone. I could hear her laying out the facts like she was in a courtroom abduction. Unlicensed security force, unlawful restraint, probable danger to a minor. She didn't sound like my wife in that moment. She sounded like a weapon, and I realized that was exactly what she was. Meanwhile, my mind replayed every warning sign we had ignored. Karen Holt had always been obsessed with authority. From the moment we moved into Willow Creek Estates 5 years ago, she had arrived at our door with a tape measure and a copy of the bylaws, telling us our mailbox was 1 inch too low. 1 inch. I had laughed, thinking she was joking. The stone-cold glare on her face told me she wasn't. That was her introduction, a declaration that in her world, she was the law. Over the years, she built her kingdom. She created her community enforcement unit, which was nothing more than 2 men with checkered pasts and inflated egos. They cruised the neighborhood in an unmarked SUV, wearing tactical vests with fake patches. Their job wasn't safety. It was intimidation. They fined people for leaving toys on the lawn, harassed teenagers for riding skateboards, and issued violation notices for trash bins left out too long. And the worst part, most neighbors complied, too afraid of her to resist. I remembered one board meeting where the Hendersons, a sweet couple with a daughter the same age as Tyler, had asked permission to build a treehouse. Karen practically held a show trial. She accused them of unauthorized vertical construction and aerial sightline obstruction. It sounded absurd, but the board, all retirees who wilted under her glare, voted her way. The Hendersons left humiliated. That night, I told Lillian Karen was nothing more than a bully with a clipboard. My wife only shook her head and said, "Bullies escalate. Adrian, always." She had been right. Now Karen had escalated to kidnapping. The notification from Tyler's smartwatch blinked again. The little blue dot pulsed on the map, right by the lake where the abandoned clubhouse stood. My chest tightened at the thought of him inside that building alone, terrified, zip-tied by strangers. Rage surged hot and cold all at once, a storm of emotions I couldn't contain. Lillian placed her phone on the console, her voice calmer now. "The warrant is on its way. Sheriff's Department will execute it. Not local police, they've got too many ties to HOA contractors. We'll meet the tactical unit there. But even with her measured words, I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She was a prosecutor, but more importantly, she was a mother. Logic couldn't completely cover the terror clawing at her. The road narrowed as we turned onto Lakeview Drive. The sun had dipped low, throwing the world into shades of purple and orange. Ahead, the old clubhouse loomed a hulking shadow against the water. Its paint was peeling, windows boarded, but a single bulb burned above a side entrance. Parked right beside it was the black SUV Sam had captured on his camera. "They're here," I muttered. Lillian killed the engine 100 yards back, tucking the car into the shadows of an overgrown hedge. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence pressed in on me until my pulse roared in my ears. Then my phone buzzed. A call from Sam. I answered in a whisper. "Adrian," he said, his voice shaky. "I didn't tell the police, but I know those guys. They stashed their equipment in the clubhouse, lawn gear, cameras, even weapons. That's where Karen's running her little operation." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a detention. This was Karen's black site. As if to confirm it, my screen lit up with another notification, an emergency HOA board meeting invite. Virtual. Right now. Karen was broadcasting from inside that very building. I tapped join, and her face filled my screen. She sat at a desk, her hair neat, her expression severe, her voice carrying that familiar self-righteous tone. Article 11 authorizes emergency security detentions in cases of imminent community threat, she announced to the board, most of whom looked bewildered on their webcams. Article 11 is for storm damage. Karen, one board member protested. "Frank," she snapped, "you lack the training to recognize predatory behavior. This boy represents a risk. Community enforcement is holding him until I certify a corrective plan." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles popped. My son wasn't a subject. He was a 14-year-old kid beside me. Lillian whispered, "Perfect. Keep her talking. She's incriminating herself." I hit record. That's when headlights cut across the road. Black armored vehicles, 3 of them, rolled in silently, killing their lights as they approached. The sheriff's emergency response team. They moved with precision. Nothing like Karen's rent-a-thugs. My heart surged with hope and dread at the same time. A calm, commanding voice boomed from a bullhorn. "This is the county sheriff's department. We have a warrant to search this property. Karen Holt, step outside with your hands in the air." Through the Zoom feed, I saw Karen's face twist in fury. She slammed her fist on the table. "This is government overreach," she shouted. "A private community has rights." Her 2 goons emerged from the side door, puffed up in their tactical vests, holding pepperball launchers dressed up to look like rifles. They aimed them at the sheriff's deputies. My heart seized. Tyler was inside, and these idiots were about to start a war. "Put the weapons down," the sheriff barked. But Karen's voice shrieked through the speakers. "Do not stand down. Defend our property." And that was the spark. The night exploded with sound. A flashbang grenade burst white light searing, the boom rattling the trees. Her men dropped instantly, clutching their ears, disoriented. Deputies swarmed, cuffing them with terrifying efficiency. The commander's voice cut through breach. The ram hit the door. Wood splintered. Deputies poured inside. I heard it then, 3 faint knocks. A pause. 3 more. The thunder code Tyler and I had made when he was a kid. My chest tightened, tears blurring my vision. He was alive. He was fighting to let us know. The storm inside me reached its peak. This wasn't just about an HOA feud anymore. This was war. The moment I heard those knocks, 3, pause, 3, my knees nearly gave out. That was our code, our secret rhythm born from thunderstorm nights when Tyler was 6 and too scared to sleep. Back then, I would tap the wall, promising him I was right there. Now, hearing it again through the chaos of a police raid, it was like his voice echoing through the years, telling me he was still fighting, still waiting for me. Deputies stormed the building, radios crackling with clipped commands. Hallway clear, left door secure. The structure loomed dark and rotten, But inside, the flashlights moved with sharp precision, slicing through shadows. Lillian gripped my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin, holding me back as if sheer parental instinct wouldn't launch me into that building. "Let them work," Sergeant Miller said firmly. He was a mountain of a man in tactical gear, calm eyes that had seen chaos before. "You go in, you compromise the operation, we'll bring him to you." I wanted to rip through him like paper, but deep down, I knew he was right. My job wasn't to be a soldier. My job was to be the father waiting outside with arms strong enough to hold whatever came back through those doors. Through my phone, Karen's voice still ranted on the HOA Zoom call. Her webcam flickered, her face twisted with rage. "You don't understand. He's a predator. I have authority. The bylaws grant me emergency powers." One board member interrupted, his voice trembling. "Karen, this is kidnapping. It's illegal. You can't detain children. You're fired." "Frank," she screamed, "all of you are weak. I am this community." Her shrill voice mixed with the pounding of boots inside the clubhouse. And then, finally, the words I'd been desperate to hear: room secure, juvenile located, no visible injuries. I gasped, collapsing against the hood of our car. My body shook uncontrollably, as if every nerve had been holding tension for an eternity and suddenly snapped. 2 minutes later, the side door burst open. A deputy emerged, guiding a pale, lanky figure in a rumpled hoodie. Tyler, my boy. His wrists bore angry red marks from the zip ties. His hair was messy, his eyes wide and haunted, but he was walking. He was breathing. "Dad," his voice cracked, raw and small. I sprinted. The deputy tried to hold me back, but Sergeant Miller waved him off. "Let him through." I crushed Tyler against me, feeling the rapid thump of his heart against my chest. He clung to me like he had when he was 5, his fingers clutching my jacket. I whispered into his hair, my voice breaking. "I've got you, son. You're safe now. We're here. We're not letting go." Lillian reached us, tears streaming freely for the first time that night. She cupped his face by brushing hair from his forehead, scanning him for injuries like a prosecutor building a case, meticulous, thorough, relentless. Tyler managed a shaky smile, but the moment of relief was shattered by a commotion behind us. Deputies dragged Karen out of the building, kicking and screaming like a dictator toppled from her throne. Her pristine blazer was torn, hair falling from its rigid bun. She looked nothing like the iron-fisted queen of HOA meetings. She looked deranged. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I am the president of Willow Creek Estates. I was saving this community from degenerates. That boy is a menace. I have the right." Her eyes landed on us, on Tyler, wrapped in our arms. Venom dripped from her voice. "You see, this is corruption. She's using her office to shield her criminal son. This is all a conspiracy." Sergeant Miller cut her off with brutal calm. "Karen Holt, you're under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful restraint, impersonating an officer, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." The deputies shoved her into the back of a patrol car as she kicked and screamed. "Without me, there is chaos. You'll regret this. I am the only one who can protect you." The door slammed shut, silencing her madness. The red and blue lights painted the scene in strobing flashes, a surreal mix of justice and nightmare. Reporters had already started to gather at the edge of the perimeter. Lillian had called one of her trusted media contacts earlier, and now the story was breaking live. Cameras turned to capture Karen's fall from power, her face pressed against the patrol car window, her empire of bylaws crumbling. Tyler clutched my sleeve, his voice barely audible. "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong." My throat tightened. I crouched to his level, looking him straight in the eye. "I know, buddy. I know you didn't. You were brave. You were kind. That's why she hated it, because you proved she was wrong." He blinked hard, trying to fight tears, but they spilled anyway, and I let mine fall too. Deputies continued hauling out evidence boxes from the clubhouse files, surveillance tapes, binders stuffed with photos of neighbors, each one labeled meticulously like a tyrant's archive. One deputy shook his head in disbelief. She was profiling the entire neighborhood. Another called out from inside, "We've got financial records. HOA funds diverted into private accounts, tactical gear, surveillance contracts. It wasn't just kidnapping. It was a full-blown criminal enterprise disguised as community governance. And for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something beyond rage or fear. I felt justice creeping in, steady and inevitable. Karen thought she was untouchable, a sovereign ruler in a suburban kingdom. But tonight proved that even tyrants fall when the truth kicks down the door. As the sheriff's team secured the scene, Sergeant Miller approached us. He gave Lillian a respectful nod, then looked at me. "Your wife's warrant saved precious time, and your son, he's safe because you both acted fast. But healing's going to take longer than tonight." I squeezed Tyler's shoulder. "We'll handle it. Together." Miller's eyes softened, just for a second. "Good. Then let us do the rest." Behind him, Karen screamed inside the patrol car, thrashing like a trapped animal. The sound barely reached me anymore. All I could focus on was the fragile weight of my son leaning against me, and the quiet strength of my wife's hand gripping mine. We had survived the storm, but I knew the real battle, the trial, the rebuilding, the scars was only beginning. When we finally brought Tyler home that night, the house no longer felt like the safe haven it once had. The porch light flickered as if it, too, was shaken by what had happened. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Tyler sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, his face pale, his hoodie still wrinkled from the struggle. He didn't touch the food I set on the coffee table, his favorite, a plate of spaghetti with extra Parmesan. He just stared at it, lost somewhere deep inside himself. Lillian was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low but razor sharp as she coordinated with the lead prosecutor in her office. She wasn't handling this case directly. It would have been a conflict of interest, but she was making sure every piece of evidence from that clubhouse was cataloged and every charge against Karen would stick like nails in a coffin. I half listened, catching words like racketeering, embezzlement, unlawful surveillance. It was bigger than just what she had done to Tyler. Karen had built a shadow empire using HOA money, weaponizing bylaws into something resembling a criminal syndicate. But my mind wasn't on the charges. My mind was on my son. I sat beside him, keeping just enough distance to not crowd him. He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. His hands trembled, but he tried to hide it. For a long time, I didn't speak. I just sat, letting him feel I was there. Finally, I said softly, "You're safe now." He blinked, as if surfacing from a fog. "Dad, she said I was dangerous. That I was a threat to the community." My heart cracked. She was lying. "Tyler, you've never been a threat to anyone. You were helping people. That's what scares her." He shook his head, eyes glassy, but everyone believed her. They tied my hands like I was some criminal. I didn't even fight back. I just froze. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought I'd never see you again." I put my arm around him, pulling him close despite his stiffness. "Freezing isn't weakness, son. Surviving is strength. And you did exactly what you needed to do. You gave us the time to find you. You knocked our code. That's what saved you." For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed his face. He leaned into me just a little, enough to tell me he believed me. The next morning, the storm hadn't passed. It had just changed form. News trucks lined the street outside our house. Reporters were camped on lawns, cameras pointed like rifles, narrating live updates about the HOA tyrant president. Karen's arrest was already a national headline. I stepped outside briefly to grab the paper, only to be swarmed by microphones. "Mr. Cole, how do you feel about the HOA president accused of kidnapping your son? Did you know about the rogue security force? Will you be pressing civil charges?" I didn't answer. I shut the door and locked it, my chest tightening. Tyler didn't need this circus. But in a way, the media storm was exactly what Lillian wanted. She had made sure Karen's face was splashed across every channel, every headline. No amount of spin from Karen's supporters could paint her as a victim now. Later that day, detectives from the sheriff's department visited our home. They carried boxes of evidence from the clubhouse surveillance files, ledgers, financial records. One officer showed us what they found pinned on Karen's corkboard wall. Photos of nearly every family in the neighborhood. Notes scribbled in Karen's tight handwriting. Unkempt lawn equals negligent. Henderson's equals subversive. Cole family equals resistant to authority. And under Tyler's picture, predatory influence. Dangerous. I felt sick. She wasn't just power hungry, the detective said grimly. She was obsessed. She built dossiers on all of you like she was running her own intelligence agency. The worst came when they opened her laptop. A forensic tech displayed a spreadsheet full of misappropriated HOA funds. Thousands siphoned into shell accounts, used to buy surveillance cameras, tactical gear, even private background check services. It wasn't just paranoia, it was embezzlement on a massive scale. But the most devastating blow didn't come from evidence, it came from her own son. That afternoon, the school counselor called. Kevin Holt had broken down in tears during class. In front of teachers and his father, he confessed everything. He told them Tyler had never bullied him. In fact, Tyler had protected him from older boys who mocked him relentlessly. Tyler had even tutored him in coding, patiently helping him on projects. Kevin admitted he lied because his mother pressured him, twisting his words until he said what she wanted to hear. When I told Tyler, he just sat quietly, eyes wet but steady. I was only trying to help him, he whispered. And you did. I told him. You helped more than you'll ever know. Hearing Kevin's confession was like a knife through Karen's entire narrative. Her justification for abducting Tyler was built on sand, and now her own son had washed it away. By evening, the HOA board had collapsed. Members resigned en masse, terrified of being implicated. The clubhouse was officially seized as evidence, and Karen sat in jail, awaiting her first hearing. But for us, the war wasn't over. That night, Tyler jolted awake from nightmares, his body shaking. He told us he kept hearing the sound of the SUV door slamming, the click of zip ties, the echo of Karen's voice declaring him a predator. I stayed awake beside him, whispering the thunder code on the wall, 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks until his breathing slowed. I realized then the truth: Karen hadn't just kidnapped my son for a few hours. She had stolen his sense of safety. She had shown him the monster behind the neighbor's smile, and that damage would take much longer to heal. But as I held his hand, I swore silently no matter how long it took, we would rebuild. She had tried to break him. Instead, she had awakened something stronger inside him, and inside us as a family. And Karen. She had no idea how completely her empire was about to collapse. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Karen Holt's arraignment. Reporters filled every seat not already taken by neighbors, victims, and curious onlookers. The air buzzed with whispers, the click of cameras, the faint hum of live broadcasts being streamed straight to the evening news. Tyler sat between Lillian and me in the front row, his hoodie pulled tight as though it might shield him from all the flashing lights. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. He wanted to be there. He wanted to see it through. When Karen was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists, the room fell silent. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The perfectly pressed blazers and polished heels were gone. What was left was a middle-aged woman with hollow eyes, lips pressed into a thin line of fury. But the fire hadn't gone out. As soon as her gaze swept the courtroom and landed on us, the mask cracked, and pure venom glared back at me. The judge read the charges in a voice as steady as stone. Kidnapping in the 1st degree, false imprisonment of a minor, conspiracy, embezzlement, unlawful surveillance, racketeering. The list went on, each charge heavier than the last. Every few seconds, gasps rippled through the gallery. By the time the judge finished, Karen's carefully built kingdom sounded less like a community organization and more like a criminal cartel. Her court-appointed attorney, a man who looked more tired than invested, tried to paint her as a dedicated volunteer who had made mistakes out of an overzealous sense of duty. He asked for bail, claiming she wasn't a flight risk. Then the prosecutor stood one of Lillian's colleagues, a relentless bulldog of a man named Ramirez. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. Your Honor, the defendant did not simply make mistakes. She created a parallel system of governance, funded by embezzled HOA dues, enforced by unlicensed security thugs, and culminating in the armed abduction of a 14-year-old boy. She is not a pillar of her community. She was its jailer. Bail must be denied. The judge's eyes peered over her glasses, her expression hard. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. For a moment, Karen's composure cracked completely. She slammed her shackled fists on the defendant's table, her voice rising to a desperate shriek. This is a conspiracy. They're all against me without me. This community will collapse into chaos. You're all weak, blind sheep. I am the only one who can keep you safe. The bailiffs dragged her back as she kicked and screamed, her voice echoing down the hallway until the heavy door shut behind her. The courtroom exhaled in collective relief, though the air still pulsed with tension. Beside me, Tyler whispered, "She really believes that, doesn't she?" I nodded grimly. That's the scariest part. She believes every word. Outside the courtroom, the scene was pure chaos. News crews swarmed the steps, thrusting microphones at anyone willing to speak. Parents clutched their children tighter. Board members who had once cowered before Karen now tried to distance themselves from her, mumbling about not knowing the extent of her actions. But the story that truly cracked everything wide open came not from the court, not from the reporters, but from her own son. Kevin Holt hadn't been present in the courtroom, but word spread fast. The school counselor released a statement, carefully worded but damning. Kevin had admitted that Tyler never bullied him. In fact, Tyler had protected him, even tutored him, when older boys at school targeted him. Karen had twisted Kevin's silence into a false accusation, then weaponized it to justify her madness. That revelation hit like a bombshell. Neighbors who had once murmured doubts about Tyler now looked at him with guilt in their eyes. Parents shook our hands, apologizing, thanking us. The narrative shifted. Tyler wasn't the villain in Karen's story. He was the victim of it. And he wasn't just a victim. He was, in his own quiet way, a hero. That evening, Tyler sat at our kitchen table, fiddling with a circuit board in his hands, soldering iron untouched beside him. I sat across from him, watching. Finally, I said, "Kevin told the truth. Everyone knows now." Tyler's hand stilled. He looked up at me, his eyes wet but determined. I didn't want to hurt him. "Dad, I just wanted to help." My throat tightened. "And you did, son. You helped more than you know. You showed him kindness when no one else did. That's the kind of strength no one can take away from you." For the first time since the abduction, Tyler smiled, small, fragile, but real. The days that followed were a whirlwind of headlines and community upheaval. The HOA board dissolved. Audits uncovered years of mismanagement, and neighbors began to talk openly about the climate of fear they had lived under. Stories poured out, families fined into submission, residents harassed, surveillance cameras catching private moments in their own yards. Karen's reign had lasted so long because everyone thought resistance was useless. But now, with her in jail, people began to stand taller, and Tyler too began to change. Slowly at first, but noticeably. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight, but he started walking to robotics club again, headphones in, head high. When he returned home one afternoon and told us he had volunteered to speak at a school assembly about knowing your rights, Lillian and I exchanged a glance, half fear, half pride. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked him gently. He nodded. "If I don't, then she still wins." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind was a storm. I thought about Karen, sitting in a cell, still convinced she was the savior of Willow Creek. I thought about Kevin, finally free to speak his truth without fear of his mother's wrath. And I thought about Tyler, my boy, standing taller, speaking louder, because of the very nightmare meant to silence him. Karen Holt had stolen our peace, but she had given us something too, the undeniable truth that unchecked power, no matter how small or suburban, can grow into tyranny. And it takes courage sometimes from the most unexpected places to stand against it. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought stayed with me. This wasn't just a story about an HOA feud gone too far. This was a story about how easily control can turn into corruption, and how love of family, of justice, can burn brighter than fear. And the trial hadn't even begun yet. The weeks leading up to Karen Holt's trial were a blur of depositions, evidence catalogs, and neighborhood gossip spilling into the evening news. Our once quiet street had become a symbol of suburban tyranny. Headline after headline painted Willow Creek Estates as the neighborhood that had birthed a dictator with a clipboard. For Tyler, each newscast was a reminder of the night he was taken, but he refused to look away. He watched, listened, and absorbed it all like he was determined not to let fear erase the truth. One afternoon, detectives invited us back to the seized clubhouse to walk through what had become Karen's twisted command center. The building, once a dusty relic, was now treated like a crime scene museum. The smell of mildew mixed with stale coffee lingered in the air. The walls were plastered with corkboards crisscrossed by red yarn, like something out of a conspiracy thriller. Only, this wasn't fiction, it was the lives of our neighbors. There were photographs of nearly every family in the community license plates, social media screenshots, even pictures of children playing in their yards. On one wall, I found our family pinned up. A photo of me mowing the lawn, Lillian getting into her car for work, Tyler climbing off the school bus. Next to each photo, Karen's handwritten notes dripped with paranoia. Adrian Cole, hostile attitude, resistant to authority. Lillian Cole, conflict of interest, dangerous influence. Tyler Cole, predatory tendencies, risk to community youth. My stomach twisted as if I'd swallowed glass. She's insane, I muttered, hands shaking as I pulled the paper closer. The detective beside me nodded grimly. She wasn't just obsessed with rules, she was obsessed with people. She turned this neighborhood into her own surveillance state, and she documented everything. Lillian's eyes burned with fury, her voice a low growl. She's going down for more than kidnapping. This is fraud, unlawful surveillance, embezzlement, a pattern of racketeering. She turned the HOA into her own criminal enterprise. Tyler stood silently, scanning the walls. His voice came out small but steady. She watched us like we were criminals. I crouched beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder. She watched us because she was afraid of us, afraid of people who couldn't be controlled. The forensic team uncovered the real bombshell when they cracked Karen's laptop. A spreadsheet popped up on the monitor, years of HOA financial records, doctored and mislabeled, tens of thousands siphoned off into security expenses, community safety, and landscape maintenance. The money had gone into private accounts, tactical gear, surveillance cameras, even the SUV they had used to snatch Tyler. The detective whistled low. She built a militia with your HOA dues. I clenched my fists so tight, my nails bit into my palms. This wasn't just a woman who had gone too far. This was organized crime hiding behind painted fences and manicured lawns. But the most devastating evidence came not from files or bank statements, but from Kevin Holt himself. At school, Kevin had begun speaking with counselors more openly. Free from his mother's shadow, the boy finally admitted what we already suspected. Karen had forced him to lie about Tyler. He confessed that older kids had bullied him relentlessly, mocking his stutter, stealing his lunch money. Tyler had stepped in not with fists, but with cleverness. He offered to tutor one of the bullies on a coding project, trading help for peace. It had worked. The bullying stopped. Kevin gained a friend in Tyler. But Karen couldn't accept that. She had interrogated her son, pushing and twisting until Kevin broke down and told her what she wanted to hear, that Tyler was the predator. That falsehood became her justification to unleash the nightmare. When Kevin's testimony reached us, Tyler sat quietly at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing circles on the wood. "I just wanted to help him," he said softly. Lillian knelt beside him, cupping his cheek. "And you did, sweetheart. That's why Karen hated it. You showed compassion she could never understand." I saw something change in Tyler then. For the first time, his shoulders didn't sag with fear. He wasn't just a victim of Karen's delusion, he was proof of her cruelty. As the trial approached, the media frenzy only grew. Reporters painted Karen as the HOA dictator, her mugshot plastered across national news. But what chilled me most was how some people online defended her. She was protecting the neighborhood. Rules are rules. It was a stark reminder tyrants always find followers. The night before the trial began, Tyler surprised us. He asked if he could speak not in court, but at a school assembly. Kids need to know what happened, he said, his voice trembling but resolute. Not just about me, about their rights, about people who pretend to have power. I looked at Lillian. She hesitated, the protective mother inside her warring with the prosecutor who knew the importance of testimony. Finally, she nodded. If you're ready, then yes. But only if you're ready. Tyler looked her in the eye. I have to be. The next day, we walked into the school auditorium. The place was packed students, parents, teachers, even a couple of cameras. Tyler stood on stage, small under the bright lights. But when he spoke, his voice carried, "My name is Tyler Cole. A few weeks ago, I was kidnapped, not by strangers in a dark alley, but by people in my own neighborhood. They said I was a threat, but I wasn't. I was just a kid walking home. They got away with it because people believed they had power, because people didn't ask questions." The room was silent. Every face turned toward him. He unfolded a slip of paper and continued. What happened to me was extreme, but it started small, with rules that didn't make sense, with people too scared to speak up. It happens in neighborhoods, it happens in schools, but you don't have to let it. You can ask for ID. You can record. You can say no. Know your rights. Because people who abuse power count on you not knowing them. He looked straight at us in the front row, then at his classmates. I'm not a victim anymore, and neither are you. The auditorium erupted into applause, loud, thunderous, unstoppable. Lillian squeezed my hand, tears streaking her face. For the first time since that nightmare began, I felt something shift inside me. Hope. Karen had tried to break him. Instead, she had forged him into something stronger. And the trial was still to come. The trial of Karen Holt began on a crisp Monday morning. The courthouse steps crowded with reporters, neighbors, and even curious strangers from outside Willow Creek. The story had grown beyond our subdivision. It was now a national conversation about power, corruption, and the dangers of unchecked authority. Headlines screamed across newspapers and news feeds, HOA president turned tyrant, neighborhood dictator on trial. From bylaws to kidnapping. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Tyler sat between Lillian and me, his hands folded in his lap, his face calm but pale. He had insisted on attending, even though he wouldn't be called as a witness. I need to see it, he told us. I need to watch her face when everyone knows the truth. When Karen was led into the courtroom, shackled and in her ill-fitting jumpsuit, the transformation was jarring. Gone was the polished woman with a clipboard and an army of bylaws. She looked like what she truly was, someone stripped of her illusion of power, but her eyes still burned with defiance. She scanned the room, her gaze locking on us with a hatred so sharp it could cut glass. The prosecutor wasted no time laying out the case. This is not about petty HOA disputes. This is about a woman who built a rogue security force with stolen funds, surveilled her neighbors without consent, and orchestrated the kidnapping of a minor under the false pretense of community safety. He held up photographs from the clubhouse, the corkboard web of paranoia, the surveillance files, the financial records. Each piece of evidence was like another brick in the wall closing around her. Then came the testimony. Detectives detailed the illegal surveillance network. Forensic accountants mapped the embezzled funds. Neighbors spoke about years of harassment and intimidation, one after another. People who had once been silent under Karen's reign stood tall and told their stories. But the most powerful voice came from someone unexpected, Kevin Holt. When the bailiff called his name, the courtroom gasped. The boy shuffled forward, his small frame nearly swallowed by the oversized blazer his father had given him. He looked fragile, his eyes darting nervously until they landed on Tyler in the front row. Tyler gave him the smallest nod, a silent reassurance. Kevin's shoulders straightened. My mom told me to say that Tyler bullied me. Kevin began, his voice trembling but clear. But that wasn't true. The truth is, I was the one being bullied by other kids at school. They called me names, took my lunch, shoved me into lockers. Tyler saw it happen, and he helped me. He didn't fight them. He made a deal. He offered to tutor one of them in coding if they left me alone. It worked. They stopped. After that, Tyler helped me with projects. He was my friend, My only friend." He paused, glancing toward his mother at the defense table. Karen's face twisted, "Fiat," but she stayed silent, her attorney's hand gripping her arm to keep her from exploding. "My mom didn't believe me," Kevin continued. "She said I was weak, that I didn't understand. She made me say Tyler was the bully. She made me lie. I didn't want to. But when you live with someone like her," his voice cracked, "you don't say no." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the reporters stopped scribbling for a moment, as if the weight of the boy's words demanded respect. When Kevin stepped down, Karen finally snapped. She lurched forward, shouting, "Lies. He's just a child. He doesn't know what he's saying. This is a setup." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order in the court, Ms. Holt. You will remain silent or be removed." But Karen wasn't listening. She turned toward the gallery, her voice rising into a shriek. "You're all blind. Without me, this community will collapse. I was saving you. I was the only one strong enough." Two bailiffs restrained her as she fought against the cuffs, screaming until her voice dissolved into hoarse gasps. The judge's expression was cold steel. "Remove the defendant. This court will not be a stage for her delusions." As Karen was dragged out, I felt Tyler's hand squeeze mine. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than any gavel strike. "She's done." The rest of the trial was almost anticlimactic. The mountain of evidence, combined with Kevin's testimony and Karen's outburst, left no doubt. The defense tried to argue she had acted in good faith, but the jury saw through it. They deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with a verdict guilty on all counts. When the judge read the sentence 25 years in state prison without parole for kidnapping, plus additional time for fraud and conspiracy, the courtroom erupted. Neighbors cried, some hugged, others clapped before the gavel restored silence. For me, it wasn't celebration. It was relief, sharp and bitter, like air after a storm. Outside, reporters clamored for comments. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to see justice serve Tyler? Do you have anything you want to say about the verdict?" Lillian spoke for us, her voice calm and resolute. "Justice was served not just for our family, but for every family in this neighborhood. Power without accountability is dangerous, whether it's in a government or a homeowners association. Let this be a reminder." That night, our house was finally quiet again. No reporters, no flashing lights, just us. Tyler sat on the couch, the blanket around his shoulders. But this time, his plate of spaghetti was empty. He looked at me and said, "Dad, it's over." "Right," I nodded, though deep inside I knew it wasn't entirely true. The trial was over. Karen was gone. But the scars, the nightmares, the distrust, the knowledge that safety can be stolen in an instant, those would take longer to heal. Still, as I tucked him in and tapped 3 times on the wall, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. Fragile, but real. Karen Holt had tried to make my son a villain. Instead, she revealed him for what he truly was: stronger, braver, and more resilient than even I had imagined. The trial was over. Karen Holt was no longer the queen of our neighborhood, no longer the dictator who ruled through fines, threats, and fear. She was a convict now, just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit, serving a sentence that would likely outlast her prime years. For Willow Creek Estates, her downfall was like a collective exhale. But for us, for my family, it was the beginning of something more complicated: healing. The first week after the verdict felt surreal. Neighbors I barely knew knocked on our door with casseroles, flowers, even handwritten letters of apology. The Hendersons, who had once been humiliated by Karen over a treehouse, stood on our porch with tears in their eyes. "We should have spoken up sooner," Mr. Henderson admitted. "We should have fought back years ago. Maybe this never would have happened." I didn't blame them. Fear has a way of silencing even the strongest voices. Karen had been masterful at weaponizing that silence, making everyone believe resistance was futile. But now, with her gone, people were talking again. The HOA board dissolved almost overnight. An interim committee was formed not by Karen's cronies, but by people who genuinely wanted to rebuild trust. Meetings were no longer staged performances of authority, but real conversations. For the first time in years, neighbors laughed at gatherings instead of whispering. The fences that had divided us, metaphorical and literal, began to come down. But inside our home, the battle wasn't over. Tyler still woke up some nights drenched in sweat, his body stiff with fear. The slam of a car door outside, the bark of a dog, even the hum of a neighbor's lawnmower could send him spiraling back into that SUV. He would clutch his blanket like armor, eyes wide, until one of us tapped our thunder code on the wall 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Only then would he breathe again. Lillian and I found ourselves navigating uncharted territory. She was fierce in the courtroom, but at night, when Tyler's nightmares returned, I saw the cracks in her armor. She would sit beside his bed, stroking his hair, whispering promises she couldn't guarantee. "You're safe now. No one will ever hurt you again." I wanted to believe those words, but the truth is, we both knew safety is never absolute. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Tyler looked up from his untouched plate. "Dad," he said softly, "can I do the assembly again? At school. Only this time not just about what happened to me, about what it means, about knowing your rights." Lillian and I exchanged a glance. I could see the protective instinct rise in her part of her wanted to shield him from more attention, from reliving the trauma in front of others. But then she saw what I saw, determination in his eyes. He wasn't asking for permission. He was telling us he was ready. A week later, the auditorium filled again. Parents, teachers, students, even some of the same reporters who had covered Karen's downfall came to listen. Tyler stepped onto the stage, clutching his folded notes. His voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "My name is Tyler Cole. Some of you know my story already, but I'm not here to talk about what was done to me. I'm here to talk about what I learned." He paused, scanning the room. Rules are supposed to protect people, not control them. Power is supposed to serve the community, not abuse it. And if someone tells you they have authority, you have the right to question it, to ask for proof, to say no. He unfolded his paper, his voice steady now. "What happened to me started small with unfair rules, with people too afraid to speak up. That can happen anywhere, in schools, in neighborhoods, even in families. But it doesn't have to end the same way. If you know your rights, if you stand together, no one can turn fear into power over you." Silence filled the auditorium, the kind that comes not from boredom, but from weight. Then, one clap, then another. Soon the room erupted into a standing ovation. Kids his age cheered. Parents wiped their eyes. Teachers nodded with pride. And Lillian gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. When Tyler stepped off the stage, he didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like a young man who had faced the worst of someone's cruelty and come out stronger. That night, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the tree line, Tyler leaned his head against my shoulder. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" he asked quietly. I thought about Karen, raging in her cell, still convinced she was the savior of Willow Creek. I shook my head. Some people never see past their own delusions, but that's not our burden anymore. Ours is to move forward. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since that night, I saw peace settle over him, not permanent, not complete, but enough. The lesson was clear, and it was one we carried together. Unchecked power is dangerous, whether it hides in a government, a company, or a homeowners association. Silence enables tyranny, but courage sometimes just a knock on the wall. Sometimes a voice on a stage can dismantle it. This story isn't just about one boy, one family, or even one corrupt HOA. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked and when fear silences good people. But it's also about resilience, about finding strength in the darkest moments, and about the courage to speak up even when your voice shakes. If there's one lesson I hope you take away, it's this: know your rights, and never let anyone convince you they have power over you without question. Authority only exists when people surrender to it. True strength lies in standing together, in demanding accountability, and in protecting one another. So I ask you, what would you do if someone like Karen Holt ruled your neighborhood? Would you stay silent? Or would you stand up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, stories of justice, resilience, and the fight against everyday tyranny, don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can make sure voices like Tyler's are never silenced again.